Lucy Monroe felt the folder slip in her sweating palms as Hyunwoo lunged for it again. "Give it to me," he snarled, his fingers closing around empty air as she twisted away, one hand pressed protectively over the curve of her belly. "You don't understand what you're holding." "I understand exactly what I'm holding." Her voice shook, but she didn't back down, even as her back pressed against the cold marble of the staircase railing. "This is fraud, Hyunwoo. Company money. Your brother's company. It's my company too." He stepped closer, and for the first time since she'd known him, Lucy saw something ugly flash across his face. Something desperate. "It will be mine. And you're going to hand that folder over right now before you ruin everything." "I'm not ruining anything. You did that yourself. You don't get to talk to me like that. You're not even really part of this family." The words landed like a slap, but Lucy held her ground, one foot finding the next step down, putting distance between them. "Move away from me, Hyunwoo. Not until you give me that folder." "No." He grabbed her wrist. "Let go of me." That was the moment Dohyun walked through the front door, 3 hours earlier than expected, his overnight bag still hanging from his shoulder. He heard his wife's voice first, sharp and afraid, echoing down the hallway, and something in his chest turned to ice. "Lucy." He rounded the corner into the foyer just in time to see his brother's hand wrapped around his pregnant wife's wrist, both of them standing at the top of the staircase, a folder of papers caught between them. "Hyunwoo, get your hands off her." Dohyun's voice cracked through the house like a gunshot. Hyunwoo startled, his grip loosening, but it was too late. Lucy yanked her arm back to free herself. Her heel caught the edge of the step, and for one suspended, horrifying second, she was weightless. "Lucy!" Dohyun's scream tore out of him as she fell backward, arms flailing, the folder bursting open midair, papers scattering like white birds through the stairwell. He was moving before he even registered his legs were moving, taking the stairs 2 at a time, but he wasn't fast enough. She hit the landing hard, her body crumpling, a sound leaving her that he would hear in his nightmares for the rest of his life. "Lucy! Lucy, baby, look at me." He was on his knees beside her, hands hovering over her, because he was terrified to touch her wrong, terrified he'd make it worse. Blood bloomed at her temple where she'd struck the railing. Her eyes fluttered, unfocused. Stay with me, please." "The baby," she whispered, her hand crawling weakly toward her stomach. "Dohyun, the baby. I know, I've got you. Don't move." He looked up, wild-eyed, and found his mother and sister frozen at the bottom of the stairs, his brother still standing at the top, papers scattered around his feet like fallen snow. "Call an ambulance. Somebody call an ambulance now." "Dohyun, it was an accident," Hyejin said, her voice too fast, too high. "She fell. We all saw it. She just lost her balance." "I saw what happened." His voice came out low and lethal, a register none of them had heard from him before. "I saw Hyunwoo's hand on her wrist. I saw him grab her. I didn't push her," Hyunwoo said, backing toward the wall. "I swear, Hyung, I didn't push her. She pulled away from me, and she just—" "Shut up." Dohyun didn't even look at him. His entire world had narrowed to Lucy's face, gray and slack against the marble, her lips moving without sound. "The ambulance. Now." Yinseo finally snapped out of her shock and grabbed her phone, hands trembling as she dialed. Dohyun gathered his wife as gently as he could, cradling her head against his chest, murmuring to her in a voice that broke on every other word. "You're okay. You're going to be okay. I'm here. I'm right here." He didn't look at the papers scattered across the floor. He didn't care what was written on them, not with Lucy's blood on his hands, not with her breath coming shallow and uneven against his shirt. Whatever was in that folder could wait. Nothing mattered except the 2 heartbeats he was terrified of losing. The ambulance arrived in what felt like both seconds and centuries. Paramedics eased her onto a stretcher while Dohyun hovered, refusing to let go of her hand until they physically separated his fingers from hers to load her into the vehicle. "Sir, you can ride with us, but you need to let us work." He climbed in anyway, folding himself into the corner of the ambulance, eyes locked on his wife's face as the doors slammed shut and the sirens screamed to life. At the hospital, they took her back immediately, and Dohyun was left standing in a waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and fear, his shirt stained with his wife's blood, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold his phone. His mother arrived 20 minutes later, Yunseo trailing behind her, both of them pale and silent. Dohyun. Hyojin reached for him, but he stepped back. Don't. I know you're upset, but it really was an accident. Your brother would never. I watched him grab her wrist, Iyama. He turned to face her, and the look on his face made her flinch. I watched my pregnant wife try to pull away from my own brother and fall down a flight of stairs. So don't stand here and tell me what I did or didn't see. Where is he? Where's Hyunwoo? He's coming. He had to park the car. Dohyun said nothing else. He sank into a plastic chair and put his head in his hands, and for the first time and longer than he could remember, he prayed. 3 hours crawled by before a doctor finally emerged, and Dohyun was on his feet before the man had fully cleared the double doors. My wife. Is she? Mr. Kang. The doctor's expression was calm, professional, but not grim, and something in Dohyun's chest loosened a fraction. Your wife came through surgery for her wrist without complications. She suffered a concussion, a fractured wrist, and significant bruising along her back and hip. We monitored the baby closely throughout. Fortunately, there's no immediate danger to either your wife or your child. Dohyun's knees nearly gave out. They're both okay. They're stable. I want to be honest with you. This was a serious fall, and a pregnancy this far along means we're not taking any chances. We'll be keeping her here for several days for close observation. Her body needs time. She's going to be in significant pain, and she'll be weak for a while. But as of right now, both mother and baby are doing as well as we could hope. Several days. At minimum. We want to watch for any delayed complications, monitor the baby's heart rate, make sure there's no internal bleeding we missed. She was very lucky, Mr. Kang. It could have been so much worse. Dohyun didn't remember sitting back down. He didn't remember his mother's hand on his shoulder or Yunseo's quiet crying beside him. All he remembered was the relief crashing through him so hard it felt like drowning. Tears he hadn't allowed himself finally breaking free. They let him see her briefly that night. Though she was still deep under the sedation, her face slack and pale against the pillow, a bandage taped at her temple, her wrist already set in a cast. He sat beside her for hours, holding her uninjured hand, and she never stirred. It was 2 days before she opened her eyes and actually knew him. Dohyun. Her voice came out as barely more than a breath, cracked and dry. Hey. He was up and leaning over her instantly, his thumb brushing gently along her jaw, careful of the bruising there. Hey, I'm here. Don't try to sit up. What happened? Everything hurts. You fell. He swallowed hard around the memory. Down the stairs. You've been here 2 days. Her eyes went wide with panic, her good hand fumbling toward her stomach. The baby dash is fine. Strong heartbeat, the doctor said. You're both going to be fine. He pressed his lips to her knuckles, closing his eyes briefly against the wave of emotion. But you scared me half to death, Lucy. You have no idea. Tears slipped down her temples into her hair. I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me. Never apologize to me for that. He stayed bent over her, forehead nearly touching hers. Just rest. That's all you have to do right now. She was too weak to say much more that day. The pain medication pulled her back under within minutes, and Dohyun sat with her, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest, grateful for every single breath. It was another full day before she was alert enough to really talk, propped up slightly against the pillows, still wincing whenever she shifted her weight. Dohyun. Her voice was stronger now, but still thin. The folder. Hyunwoo. He was trying to take it from me, and I need you to understand. Lucy. No, listen to me. Those documents matter. I found something, and I was trying to. Lucy. He took her uninjured hand in both of his, holding it firmly enough to still her. Whatever is in that folder is going to still be there. It's not going anywhere. Right now, all I care about is you resting and getting stronger. Do you understand me? But, rest. I'll handle everything. His voice was gentle but final, the same tone he used in boardrooms when a decision had already been made. You don't have to carry this right now. Let me carry it. Her eyes searched his face for a long moment, and whatever she found there made her exhale slowly and sink back against the pillows. You promise you'll actually look into it? Not just let him talk his way out of it. I promise. His jaw tightened. I saw enough that day to know something is wrong. I intend to find out exactly what. She nodded, already fading again, her eyelids heavy. Be careful. He was scared, Dohyun. People who are that scared do stupid things. So am I. he murmured, once she drifted off, her hand still curled loosely in his. Scared out of my mind. He sat there long after she fell back asleep, watching her chest rise and fall, and let himself think, really think, for the first time since he'd walked through that door and heard her scream. Why had Hyunwoo been in his house at all? He'd made it clear months ago, after the incident at Chuseok when his mother called Lucy ungrateful in front of the entire extended family, that his siblings weren't welcome unless they could treat his wife with basic respect. He loved his mother. He didn't hate his brother or his sister. But he was done rescuing them from the consequences of choices they refused to grow up and own. Lucy had never once told him to cut them off. If anything, she was the one who kept reminding him that family was family, that people could change, that Hyojin loved her children even if she showed it badly. Lucy had never tried to take his family from him. She'd only ever asked that they stop trying to walk over her in her own home. So why was Hyunwoo desperate enough to grab his brother's pregnant wife over a folder of paperwork? He didn't have answers yet, but he intended to get them. That evening, while a nurse checked Lucy's vitals, Dohyun stepped into the hallway to find his mother who had come to visit, wrapped in a cardigan, looking older than he remembered her looking. How is she? Stable? Sleeping? He rubbed a hand over his face. Yama, why was Hyunwoo at the house? Hyojin's eyes flickered, just for a second, before she smoothed her expression. He said he needed to speak with Lucy about something. Family business. What kind of family business does my brother have to discuss with my wife that he couldn't discuss with me? I don't know the details, Dohyun. He studied her for a long moment, and something cold settled in his stomach, the same instinct that had made him a formidable businessman long before he'd become a decent husband. You're lying to me. I am not. You are. He kept his voice low, controlled, though it cost him. I don't know what you're protecting him from, but I promise you, Yama, I am going to find out. And if it turns out you knew and said nothing while my wife lay on that staircase, I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive that. He walked away before she could answer, back toward Lucy's room, needing to be near her, needing the sight of her breathing to steady the fury and fear churning in his chest in equal measure. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the chair beside her bed, her hand in his, and replayed the scene on the staircase over and over. Hyunwoo's white-knuckled grip, the scattered papers, the word fraud sitting like a stone at the bottom of his mind, because he'd read that much before everything else fell apart. Dohyun stepped into the hallway and called his secretary, Yoonji, a woman who had worked for him for 6 years and had never once repeated a word he told her in confidence. I need you to look into something for me. Quietly. Of course, sir. What am I looking into? Hyunwoo's division. All of it. Transfers, ledgers, vendor accounts, anything that's moved through his desk in the last 2 years. I want it cross-checked against the main accounts. A pause on the line. Should I loop in the finance team? No. Just you. Nobody else knows about this yet, and I want it kept that way until I understand what I'm looking at. Understood. I'll start tonight. He hung up and stood alone in the hallway for a long moment, staring at nothing, his brother's panicked face flashing behind his eyes. Whatever this was, it had nearly cost him his wife and his unborn child. That was not a debt he intended to let slide. By the next afternoon, Yoonji called back, her voice careful in a way that immediately put him on edge. Sir, I found something, but I don't fully understand it yet. There are transfers into Hyunwoo's division accounts that don't match any invoices. And there's something else. What? There are personal deposits, too, into accounts belonging to Mr. Hyunwoo and Miss Yunseo. Recurring ones. They're not coming from the company. Dohyun's grip tightened on the phone. Then where are they coming from? Yoonji hesitated. I'm still tracing the source, sir. I should have more by tomorrow. But the account numbers look personal. Private, not corporate. Send me what you have. Everything. Tonight. He ended the call and stood there in the hospital corridor, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, a strange unease settling low in his stomach. Something about the shape of it, personal deposits, recurring, quietly moving toward his siblings, felt wrong in a way he couldn't yet name. He walked back into Lucy's room and stood at the foot of her bed, watching her sleep, her face still bruised, her wrist still in its cast, and thought about the promise he'd made her. Rest. I'll handle everything. He intended to keep it. But standing there, phone heavy in his hand with answers he didn't yet understand, Dohyun had the distinct feeling that whatever he was about to uncover was going to change everything he thought he knew. not just about his brother, but about his wife. A week passed before Lucy was finally strong enough to sit up on her own and eat a full meal without her hands trembling around the spoon. Dohyun barely left her side, running his company from a laptop propped on the rolling hospital tray, taking calls in hushed tones in the corridor so she could sleep undisturbed. Then Yoonji asked to see him in person. He met her in a small conference room near his office, a folder considerably thicker than the one that had started all of this sitting closed on the table between them. "Tell me," he said, not bothering to sit. "The transfers into Hyunwoo's division, they were covering losses. Bad investments. He put company funds into 2 private ventures over the last 18 months, both of which failed. Rather than report the losses, he moved money between departmental accounts to hide the gap. Falsified some vendor invoices to make the numbers reconcile." Dohyun's jaw tightened. "How much?" "Just under $8 million, sir." He sat down slowly. "There's more," Yoonji said, sliding the folder toward him. "The personal deposits I mentioned. Into Hyunwoo's account and Yunseo's. They weren't coming from the company. They were coming from Lucy." The room went very quiet. "Say that again." "Your wife?" "Personal transfers. Recurring, going back almost 14 months. She paid off a significant portion of Hyunwoo's private debt last spring. And there are 3 separate payments to Yunseo, memoed simply with things like "for you" and "don't worry about it." Dohyun stared at the papers without truly seeing them, the numbers blurring together. "Why would she do that?" "I don't know, sir. That wasn't something I could find in a ledger." He sat there for a long time after Yoonji left, the folder open in front of him, and thought about every dinner where his mother had looked at Lucy like she didn't belong at the table. Every time Yunseo had rolled her eyes when Lucy spoke. Every cutting comment Hyunwoo had made about gold diggers and outsiders, never quite saying her name, but always looking right at her when he said it. These were the same people. The same people who had made his wife cry in a bathroom at his mother's birthday dinner. And she had been quietly keeping them afloat the entire time, never saying a word to him. He didn't understand it. And he needed to. He drove straight to the hospital, the folder on the passenger seat, and found Lucy sitting up against her pillows, color finally returning to her face, watching something quiet on the television mounted in the corner. "Hey," she said, smiling when she saw him. Though the smile faded the moment she read his expression. "What's wrong?" He shut the door behind him and pulled the chair close to her bed, the folder in his hands. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." "Okay. Did you send money to Hyunwoo? And to Yunseo?" Lucy went very still. Her eyes dropped to the folder, then back up to his face, and he watched something like resignation settle over her features. "How did you find out?" "So it's true." "Dohyun." "How much, Lucy?" She was quiet for a moment, her fingers picking at the edge of the blanket. "I paid off about 200,000 of Hyunwoo's debt last spring. 2 of the deposits to Yunseo were for rent, when she was behind and too proud to ask you directly. The 3rd was for a medical bill she didn't want your mother to know about." "Why?" His voice cracked on the single word. "Why would you do that? These are the same people who treat you like you don't belong in this family. My mother has said things to you that I still haven't forgiven her for, and you were secretly bailing them out." Lucy looked at him like the answer should have been obvious. "Because they're your family." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have." She reached for his hand, wincing slightly at the movement of her casted wrist. "I never wanted you to lose them, Dohyun. I know how they treat me. I'm not blind to it, and I'm not stupid. But I've watched what it does to you when you have to choose between defending me and disappointing your mother. I didn't want you carrying that weight forever. So when I found small ways to help without you having to be the one to step in, I took them. You should have told me. You would have refused. You would have told me they don't deserve it. And you'd have been right. And then you'd have felt guilty anyway, because some part of you still hopes they'll grow up." Her eyes were wet now. "I wasn't trying to earn their approval, Dohyun. I gave up on that a long time ago. I just didn't want their problems to become another weight on you." He sat there, gripping her hand, feeling something in his chest crack wide open. All this time, his family had blamed her for changing him, for making him cold toward them, for stealing him away. And she had been quietly protecting them from the very consequences he'd stopped shielding them from. "I had no idea," he said quietly. "I had no idea you were carrying any of this. It wasn't your burden to carry. It still isn't." She squeezed his hand. "What did you find in the folder?" "The one from the stairs." He exhaled slowly and told her everything. The failed investments. The falsified invoices. The $8 million in losses Hyunwoo had spent over a year hiding. Lucy closed her eyes. That's why he panicked. And then I'm going to decide what happens next. He found Hyunwoo days later, at their mother's house, sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. He looked up when Dohyun walked in, and whatever composure he'd been holding on to crumbled at the sight of the folder in his brother's hand. Hyung, sit down. Don't talk yet. Hyunwoo sat. Dohyun placed the folder on the table between them and said nothing for a long moment, letting the silence stretch until his brother couldn't stand it. I can explain, Hyunwoo finally said. Then explain. I made some bad calls. Investments that were supposed to work out. I was going to replace the money before anyone noticed. I swear, I just needed more time. You stole from the company. I borrowed. You falsified invoices, Hyunwoo. That's not borrowing. That's fraud, and you know it, because you spent months hiding it instead of coming to me. Hyun was face flushed because you never would have given me a chance if I told you. You've never trusted me to run anything real. You keep me in that division doing busy work while you build your own empire and act like the family company is beneath you. That's not true, and you know it, isn't it? You've had Yoonji managing the transition plans for years, grooming me for nothing, because you never actually intended to hand anything over. Dohyun's hands flattened on the table. I was waiting for you to be ready. I had Yoonji preparing a transition specifically so you would have support learning the responsibility properly, instead of being thrown into it and drowning. I wanted to give you the company, Hyunwoo. I never wanted to run it forever. I have my own, because every single time, you make a reckless decision and then hide from the consequences instead of facing them. And instead of coming to me like a grown man, you grabbed my pregnant wife on a staircase because you were more afraid of me finding out than you were of hurting her. Hyunwoo flinched like he'd been struck. She could have lost the baby, Hyunwoo. She could have died. Because you panicked over money. I didn't mean for her to fall. I know you didn't mean it. That doesn't change what happened. Dohyun stood. I'm done. Done with what? With carrying you. With Yoonji managing a transition you clearly aren't ready for. With protecting you from a mess you built yourself. He picked the folder back up. You wanted the company so badly. Congratulations. You can have exactly what you created, and you can figure out how to fix it yourself. Hyung, please. No. Dohyun's voice didn't rise, didn't waver. I'm not rescuing you this time. This is the consequence of your own choices, and you're going to face it. He left him sitting there at the table and drove straight to Yoonji's office, instructing her to halt the transition plans entirely and to begin the process of formally addressing the fraud through proper legal and financial channels, structured, controlled, but no longer shielded by his name. That evening, he went to see his mother. Hyejin opened the door, already looking wary, as though she knew what was coming. Dohyun, I know about the fraud, and I know you've known Hyunwoo was struggling for a long time and said nothing to me. Her face went pale. I didn't want to cause problems between you two. You let him almost destroy my wife instead. He kept his voice level, though it cost him. Yama, I love you. I'm not here to cut you out of my life. But you are no longer welcome in my home unless you can treat Lucy with basic respect. That's not a punishment. That's the bare minimum I should have required years ago. She's the reason you're like this now. So cold with your own family. No. He shook his head slowly. She's the reason I finally grew up enough to stop letting you excuse Hyunwoo and Yunseo's choices. She never asked me to distance myself from you. That was entirely my decision, and it was long overdue. He held her gaze. I need you to understand that clearly, because I won't have you blaming her for something that was never hers to cause. Hyejin's eyes filled, but she said nothing, and Dohyun let the silence answer for both of them before he turned and walked back to his car. Lucy came home a month after the fall, moving slowly, carefully, her wrist still healing, but her color back and her eyes bright again. Dohyun had turned their bedroom into something close to a recovery suite, extra pillows, a small bell on her nightstand, so she wouldn't have to call out if she needed him, though she teased him relentlessly about it within the first hour. I'm pregnant, Dohyun, not made of glass. You fell down an entire staircase. Humor me. She let him fuss, mostly because she understood now what those 2 weeks had done to him, the fear still lingering behind his eyes whenever she moved too quickly. One evening, sitting together on the couch, her feet in his lap as he rubbed slow circles into her ankle, she brought up the one thing they hadn't fully finished discussing. Are you going to be all right? She asked. With your mother. With Hyunwoo. I don't know yet. He looked down at her, quiet for a moment. I'm not trying to lose my family, Lucy. I want you to know that. I just can't keep sacrificing your safety and your peace to keep them comfortable. I don't want you to destroy your relationship with your mother because of me. You didn't do this. His hand stilled on her ankle. Forgiving her doesn't mean I have to keep handing her chances to hurt you. Those are two different things. I can love my mother and still protect my wife from her. I should have understood that a long time ago. Lucy studied him for a moment, then smiled, small and tired but real. Look at you. Setting boundaries. I had a good teacher. I didn't teach you that. You taught me what it looks like to love people without letting them walk all over you. I just finally started applying it to myself. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, then lower, resting his hand against the curve of her belly, where a small, definite kick answered him a moment later. He laughed, soft and disbelieving. Still stubborn. Like the father. Like the mother, he corrected, who apparently negotiates hospital bed rest and secretly funds an entire family behind my back. In my defense, it worked out. It nearly cost me everything. His voice sobered, and he pressed his forehead to hers the way he had that first night in the hospital. Don't ever carry something like that alone again. Not because I don't trust you to handle things. Because you don't have to anymore. Whatever weight there is, we carry it together now. Together, she agreed. The months that followed were quieter than either of them expected. Hyunwoo, stripped of his division and facing the company's board under proper oversight, began the slow, humbling process of repayment and restructuring, learning firsthand that wanting control and being capable of carrying it were two very different things. Yunseo, who had spent years depending on her brother whenever she made a mess, was finally forced to handle her own problems without his money or protection. Hyejin remained his mother, and Dohyun never stopped loving her, but the boundaries he had drawn were firm. She was no longer welcome in their home unless she could respect Lucy. For the first time, the family had to live with the consequences of their own choices instead of expecting Dohyun to clean them up. The baby, a girl, arrived healthy and loud on a Tuesday morning in early autumn, and Dohyun cried harder holding his daughter than he had at any point during the entire ordeal that began on that staircase. Lucy watched him from the hospital bed, exhausted and glowing. The man who had once been arrogant, impatient, and impossible had become the kind of husband who wouldn't let anyone hurt her, and the kind of father who already looked completely undone by a tiny pair of hands. He kissed Lucy's forehead. You changed my life. She smiled. You did that yourself. Maybe. But I wouldn't have known how without you. Their daughter stirred in his arms, and Lucy reached for his hand. This time, there was no family drama waiting outside their door. No one demanding something from them. Just the three of them. And for the first time, Dohyun understood that protecting the people you love didn't mean carrying everyone. Sometimes, it simply meant choosing your family and protecting the home you built together. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I'll see you in the next one, Soulmates.